Did you know that stories are not just for bedtime? When they're used in therapy, they can be truly transformative, and there's evidence to suggest that stories can actually heal. So, in this video, I want to talk about how to use stories and metaphors in therapy, and I'm also going to be promoting a book of mine. But let's get into it. As therapists, we'll all have encountered it. There's a moment in therapy when the client's defense mechanisms come up, and that can be a bit of an issue. But it's natural because it's a difficult thing that they need to talk about. They maybe don't want to talk about it, but they know they need to. But how can we get past this? Another thing that might happen, and this is an interesting thing to listen out for, is when clients use stories and metaphors to describe what they're thinking and what things feel like. So they may say things like, I feel like I'm drowning at work, or I'm just in quicksand. Now, when you listen out for these kinds of things, what the client is actually doing is giving you a massive clue what it's like for them in that moment. So listen out for these big clues that the clients are giving you. Now, here's where stories and metaphors can be so powerful in therapy. Because when we listen for them and when we use them ourselves, but more importantly, if a client brings them into the session, okay, when we listen out for these, not only does it give clarity on how they're feeling, but it also gives us a clue for either to bypass the defense mechanism or to explore what that defense mechanism may be like. So an example could be, say for instance, a client says, "Oh, I feel like I'm just stuck in quicksand." Explore what the quicksand is like. Is anything else near the edge of the quicksand? Is there anything to grab onto? How long have they been in the quicksand for? Is it actually quicksand or is it something else? Have they got something in the pocket that can assist them? And you see, by doing something like this, when they bring something like this into the session, you almost want to put I would suggest, your Sherlock Holmes hat on and start looking for clues and investigating the scene. Because if a client just says, "Oh, I'm just struggling," well, that's one thing. But when they say something like, "I'm stuck in quicksand," all of a sudden, you've got a massive area for potential exploration. And it's important that when you do this, the client hears what they say as well. So they're listening to their own advice, they're listening to their own experience. And with stories and metaphors, not only does it bypass the inner security guard, this hearing what you're saying is so powerful, probably more than you realize. So you might be wondering, well, how would I actually use these in therapy? If the client doesn't bring them up, do I bring it up? Or if the client brings it up, where do I go with it? So, like I mentioned before, if the client brings it up, really listen out for these because they're being said all the time. With everything that they're saying, there's a story or a metaphor, because what the client is trying to do, they're trying to get you to see what it's like for them. And they're probably going to use a story to explain that. So when they say this, they feel like they're drowning, they don't mean they're drowning, but they probably feel what they're probably trying to convey is, this is relentless. I'm losing my way. I'm getting weaker. It's getting harder. I can't see how it's going to stop. I can't find a way out. All that is conveyed in a story or a metaphor such as, I feel like I'm drowning. Okay? So the first one is to listen out for them. Now the second one is to use a story or a tale to help you bypass their critical faculty. Now the story can be something similar to what they're talking about, the story or the metaphor, or it can be something totally off-piste. Okay? But there's certain things that you've got to do when you do this. And you've got to imagine a bouncer of a door, okay? And the bouncer of the door is, or the doorman, doorwoman, whatever way you want to call them. There's a bouncer on the door. And the bouncer's job is to make sure that nothing unwanted comes in, okay? So their defense mechanism is the bouncer of the door. Now, there's three things that you've got to do if you're going to do this. And here they are. Firstly, you need to bypass the defense mechanism. You need to disarm the bouncer, so the bouncer doesn't think there's a danger. Then when you've done that, you can build tension with the story that you're going to tell. And then you're going to give fresh insights. And this little roadmap of doing this, of getting past the bouncer, okay, building tension in the story and giving fresh insights can really make a huge difference. So let me give you an example of what this might be. Now, with the book I wrote on this called Metaphors and Stories for Therapists, fantastic Christmas gift, shameless plug, I'd recommend it. One of my favourite stories in this is a great one to use in your consultations, and it's called The Driveway. Okay, and the way the driveway story goes is I tell a story and I say, imagine you had a driveway and it was a brick driveway and it was full of weeds. And every time you leave the house, the weeds have got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just getting worse and worse. And one day you think enough's enough. Okay, I'm gonna deal with this. And you go to the shed and you might get a rake and a brush and a hoe, some recycling bags, I guess. And you get rid of all the weeds that you can see, and it's all in the recycling, and that's in the bin. And you're standing back and you're looking at your work and you think, good job, done a great job there, looks great. But there's a problem. The problem is, you know they're all coming back. They're all coming back because all the roots are still down there. All the things that caused the weeds in the first place, they're still there. Now, a better way to do this might be, instead of going for the weeds, what about going for the roots? Let's say we did the roots. Let's say we got some weed killer down and we went over the entire driveway and then we cleared away all the rubbish, and then we went over the driveway again, and the weed killer really went down through the soil and killed the roots. Imagine that. You'd know that's a job well done. Now, if you're coming home one day and there is a weed that's on the driveway, not only does it stand out because everywhere else is so nice, it's weak. It's weak because of the work you've done earlier. And it's just the easiest thing in the world to finger and thumb, get the weed, make sure you get the root, be a tiny little thing, put it in the bin, carry on about your day. What do you think? And this is the way I will deliver a story or a metaphor. Now, of course, I'm saying more. I'm not really talking about a driveway. I'm talking about, if we're going to do it, let's do it properly. But the story, hopefully, and hopefully you can see this, the story conveys it in such a way that they can build a scene on the screen of their mind to imagine what would happen. Now, that story was about them in particular. I was asking them to imagine they had a driveway of a house and they had weeds and they were going to do the work. But it doesn't have to be. Another one of the stories from their book is about a tree that's fallen over, and it's a true story. Near where I live, there's this beautiful country walk I go on. I've been going on it for years with my kids. They're all adults now. And there's a particular tree that always catches my attention when I go past it. Now, it's huge, this tree. I don't know what kind of tree it is. It's huge, but it's fallen over on its side. And it must have been there for some time because it's just massive. And there's all plants and weeds and stuff growing around the tree. But the tree's so big you can really see it still on top of the ground. And half the root ball has come up with the tree as well. Now, you'd expect something like that to be dead because it was a massive tree. And the root ball of this thing is enormous. But here's the surprising thing. Not only is the tree still alive, it's flourishing. And every time I go on this walk, I always walk past this huge tree. And the funny thing is, where the tree has fallen over on the ground, what it's done is roots have come out on parts of the tree that you wouldn't expect them to embed the tree further into the ground. And it's promoted all its growth onto the trunk that's going up. And this thing is flourishing. Now, if I were to tell a story something like that, and I've gone off piece from what's in the book, but if I was to tell a story or a metaphor like that, what I'm really saying to the client is, you might be down, but you're not out. Or you might have taken a few knocks. Maybe you feel like you're being beaten up a little bit, mentally, emotionally, physically. but that doesn't mean it's over for you. It means there's more. You might have to find a different way, but there's more. Okay. So this is the power of using metaphors and stories in therapy. It's probably, I do it probably 80 to 90% of the time. I'm actively listening, as well as all the other things that I do as well. But I'm actively listening, because when a client brings something up like this, inwardly, I'm rubbing my hands, because this is territory I'm very, very comfortable working in and working with. So you might be wondering, well, okay, well, that sounds great, but I don't know any stories to tell. That's all right. I'm going to do the shameless plug again. My book, it's got 42 stories in it, and they're all normal stories, not convoluted, just very, very easy to remember. And there's a physical version that you can get on Amazon. There's a Kindle version if you want it on your tablet, but there's also an audiobook version which is on Audible, so you can listen to how I present these things. On the one that I mentioned before, the one of the driveway, if you use that one alone in one of your consultations, you'll probably find that clients will get across the finish line with you. I've used that so many times in my own consultations, and when I've done it, the client said, yeah, let's get a date in the diary. Let's go for the roots. I'm fed up with this thing. And by listening to a story, it's not only negated the dormant, and you've bypassed the critical faculty, you've engaged their attention. And when you've engaged their attention with the story and they're starting to see it on the screen of the mind, they're starting to fill in the bits that you're not saying. So I'm talking about this driveway. They may actually have a driveway like this, or maybe they don't. Maybe they live in a block of flats, but they can imagine what it would be like. These weeds doing the same job over and over again. I do it, it looks nice, they all come back. I do it again. I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life until I go for the roots. That's all implied just by telling a story about weeds in a driveway. So if you'd like to buy the book, I think it would make a fantastic Christmas present as well. And I'm not just saying that because I wrote it. Well, I probably am. I think it would make a fantastic Christmas present. The links are going to be in the description below. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is going to be my last one of 2024. But 2025, I've got some big things coming, which I'm uber excited to share with you. And I think it's going to help you as well. So I've got loads of plans, loads of ideas. I'm already getting ahead of the game with that. So for the time being, I hope you're enjoying Therapy Business School. If you have, please remember to do the like, the share and the subscribe. That stuff really does help the channel, by the way. And I will see you in 2025. My best wishes from me to you. Bye-bye.